school hall to the halls of the Texas Capitol.
If Texas is to remain the leader in job creation, we must become the leader in educating our children.
Calls to reform education in the state come from every direction. But what's the right way for Texas schools? Plus, how prepared is your child's teacher? KXAN discovers some teachers have unlimited tries to prove they're up to speed. We break it all down this week on State of Texas In Depth.
To break the cycle of poverty, we must be sure every student graduates. And that means where we have failing schools, that those parents deserve change and they deserve a parent's choice to send their child to the best school they believe for their child.
It was a major theme at this year's inauguration, and it will be a major talking point throughout the legislative session. Thank you for joining us for State of Texas In Depth. I'm Josh Hinkle. This morning we'll look at all sides of education in Texas. Whether you have a child in school or simply pay taxes, the direction our schools go will impact your family. The session will likely see two big topics: school finance and school choice. Late last week, demonstrators gathered outside the Texas State Capitol for a final School Choice Week rally. But as KXAN's Phil Prazen explains, the issue is more complicated than just one topic.
Jose Toscano immigrated here years ago, wanting to give his 3 kids the education he never had.
We moved 11 times looking for better school.
They moved from Austin to Round Rock, so in case the money ran out for St. Stephen's Episcopal School, they had a backup.
We were always thinking, what if someday we just can't afford the private school?
A situation Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and the new conservative Senate plan to tackle.
That parent, that grandparent, that guardian does not have choice, and I'm going to fight to give that parent choice for their children because they deserve it.
It would have helped tremendously.
Jose Toscano says he wouldn't mind if his property tax dollars in Round Rock paid for a family to send their kid to an Austin school or another district. We'll see how many lawmakers will let that fly, with our school districts being in place for decades.
That was KXAN's Phil Prazen. He also spoke one-on-one with one of the main voices on school choice, Republican State Senator Donna Campbell of New Braunfels.
Senator Donna Campbell swings for the fences with her taxpayer savings grants, commonly known as vouchers or universal school choice.
The description of that bill really does fit with the mindset of helping those that are usually underserved, underprivileged in some way.
The president of the Senate, Dan Patrick, says he'll put his shoulder behind school choice, and on the heels of National School Choice Week, momentum is high.
It's also a moral obligation.
Sometimes it takes the time for the seed of a good idea to be planted.
But if it passes the Senate, school choice has not played well in the House, and every lawmaker could be timid with a looming court decision on school finance.
We're trying to look at all the obstacles. What government has done is basically become a bureaucracy to create barriers to educational choice for children. So be a school in the rural area or the urban area, the issue is the same, the passion is the same. Once again, I think there's a concern for, will funding be cut? I believe, most certainly with some of the bills that we're going to put forward, that is not a risk.
There's also fear that scores of kids would leave schools in Texas's urban areas.
There's not going to be a mass exodus of children from public schools. Public schools serve a great purpose. What we're trying to do is introduce some competition, allow more flexibility in the public schools. People are sometimes uncomfortable with changing the status quo, but status quo is exactly that. It's mediocrity, and we can't afford that for our children anymore.
Vouchers and other school choice issues raise plenty of questions from local districts. In an interview this week with KXAN, Austin ISD Superintendent Paul Cruz said the district provides choice within its boundaries.
We do offer so many different opportunities in Austin ISD, from around language programs, dual language programs, science, technology, engineering, and math, single gender schools, so we have a lot of options for our students and for our families.
Meanwhile, other districts like Round Rock ISD are taking a firm stance against vouchers. Keep in mind that could affect a district's bottom line, since the number of students in class affects how much state money a district receives.
It's not that we're worrying about we're going to have a mass exodus. What we're worried about is that students are not going to be receiving the same quality of education if they're going to programs that don't have the same state standards that public schools have.
For a broader look, right now 13 states and Washington, D.C. have some sort of school voucher. We looked into the details of each program. Almost all of the states treat the vouchers as scholarships, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. Like most scholarships, students must qualify. The 10 states in green have programs specifically for students with certain learning and physical disabilities. Some states, shown in blue, provide vouchers based on the family's income, and states like Ohio, Arizona, and Wisconsin provide the scholarships for students in poor performing or inner city districts or rural communities that don't have schools. The other big debate over how the state funds public education. Several school districts, including Austin and Round Rock, are suing the state over the school's finance system. They argue the state system is unfair and insufficient. The state Supreme Court will take up the case, which means we probably won't have a ruling before the end of the session. Some lawmakers said still they need to tackle the issue now. Coming up, hundreds of Central Texas teachers failing their state certification exams multiple times and still in your child's classroom. A KXAN investigation next on State of Texas in Depth. In Texas public schools, your child gets just 3 tries to pass the STAR test, but we found their teachers get an unlimited number of chances on their own required exams. Like many professions, teachers and principals must pass certain tests for certification. It's the state's way of ensuring they're qualified for their job. Educators are commonly allowed to work in schools even while they're still trying to become certified. Yes, many parents probably aren't aware their child's teacher or even their principal might have a probationary certification because they have not passed the required state exams for that job. Like a vice principal we found in the Manor ISD. While working in that position, he failed not 1, not 2, but 10 times before finally passing on the 11th attempt. But KXAN investigator Brian Collister found some have failed over and over.
We are always looking for the best qualified candidate out there when we hire, and sometimes we have to hire someone that's not fully certified.
Including that Manor High School vice principal, who was in that job for 2 full school years before he passed his required state exams. Superintendent Kevin Brackmeyer says his district stands by and lends help to its educators still working to pass all their state exams.
What do you say to a parent who doesn't feel comfortable that the educator holding their child accountable for their test scores hasn't necessarily passed their tests?
I would say that it's important to trust the process and trust that the district is in fact making sure that we hire the best qualified candidate. There is a tremendous amount of support.
And it's more common than many parents might realize. Educators struggling to pass exams for jobs they currently hold or are trying to get. In fact, we found in Central Texas, at the beginning of this school year, there were more than 230 who had failed their exams at least 5 times. Manor had 22, Round Rock 24, Pflugerville 27, and Austin ISD 77. Those who fail can work on probation for up to 3 years, taking the exams as many times as needed during that time. Not even the chairman of the Texas House Education Committee was aware of that until we told him.
I think we need to try to find teachers that can get over that bar.
Representative Jimmy Don Aycock says his committee will look at ways to improve teacher quality.
I think the committee will be charged to look at what is appropriate for probationary certification and how far you continue that probation in general. I think there certainly logically should be some limit to that.
Do you have teachers that just have a hard time passing the certification test?
I think, yes, we do. We absolutely do.
These AISD administrators say without the probationary certificates, they'd be left without much needed math, science, and bilingual education teachers.
I can guarantee you our principals, who are outstanding campus leaders, are keeping track of these probationary teachers and really watching it. And if that teacher's struggling after a certain amount of time, they're going to have that discussion with that teacher that this is not the appropriate place. If that teacher's doing an outstanding job in the classroom and really bringing those kids along and still aren't passing the test, then that principal's going to get with that program and say, okay, why are we not helping support them, and what is it that they're not doing well to be successful?
To help, they must enroll in certification programs.
The better prepared you are, the better your chances of passing the test.
That include online help and sample tests like this one.
So we're looking at persuasive text, and now we're going to look at the techniques that they used in the article that you have.
Gloria Cruz teaches one of those much-needed subjects, bilingual education, in Round Rock ISD. She started this school year with a probationary certificate because she had not yet met all the requirements.
I don't think that was a problem for the parents as well. So 2 claps for Jessie for sharing.
Cruz has now passed all of her exams, thanks to an alternative certification program.
I feel like I'm still learning, and it's even though I took the trainings and I did the face-to-face, the hands-on was the true learning experience for me.
That was KXAN investigator Brian Collister reporting. We will follow up with that House Education Committee to see if it considers limits to the number of times educators can fail their exams. And if you have a concern with your child's educator, talk to the principals at your school or someone in the administration and ask them what they're doing to help that specific teacher become certified. If you go to the homepage of KXAN.com right now, in this story, we'll tell you in which districts educators are failing multiple times. See if your child's is among them. How well are teachers trained, and are they ready? House Education Chair Jimmy Don Aycock joins us in studio, and Morgan Smith from the Texas Tribune when State of Texas In Depth returns. Your school in your state. What does the future hold for Texas education? To tackle this complicated topic, I'm joined by our roundtable of education policy experts, Chairman of the Texas House Committee on Public Education, Representative Jimmy Don Aycock, and Morgan Smith, the education reporter at our media partner, the Texas Tribune. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Vouchers. It's a big topic already with just a few weeks in this session. School choice is something that a lot of parents are concerned about. Should I be able to take my kid out of the district to be in a different school, and how does it affect tax dollars? How do you think that the Education Committee is going to handle that on the House side?
Well, we don't even know who the Education Committee will be yet, will be my first comment, so it'll depend on who's on that committee. And remember that school choice is somewhat different than school vouchers. School vouchers let you leave the public school systems completely, and that's always been a little more of a hotly debated topic in the House. The Senate historically has been more favorable toward that than the House. The last time we had a test vote of any kind was last session. Over 100 House members voted that they didn't think vouchers were a good idea. School choice, on the other hand, I think has broader approval in general.
And that's something certainly that our new leaders, like Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, has really been vocal about, that parents should have the ability to have school choice.
Yeah, and Chairman Aycock, you've said before that even having a discussion about private school vouchers or a voucher type program would depend on the accountability that's included for the public money that's being used in that program. Can you talk a little bit more about what an acceptable form of accountability might be?
Well, I think there'll be a lot of work done over the session about that discussion, but basically, if you're going to have state money or taxpayer money spent, I think there needs to be some control over the quality of that education that it buys, and over some of the curriculum and some of the instructors. You can't just pass out taxpayer money without some discussion of quality control, I think.
Mm-hmm. What do you do with some of those districts that are worried that they're going to lose some of those tax dollars?
Well, I think that's always part of the discussion. For example, if you look at just big districts and you lose a few hundred or even a few thousand students, it's not a big hit to them. It's always more of a concern. I think it's part of why the House is always a little more reluctant. When you talk about a small district that might lose, even at some districts as many as 5 or 10 students, would probably cripple that district financially. It depends a lot on the district you're talking about.
You've also talked about money going to religious schools and private schools. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we have a carefully stated policy in the state that you don't teach religious curriculum with state money, and I think that's part of the discussion that will take place, is do you allow private money to flow to a religious institution that teaches a religious curriculum, be that mainstream like Catholic or Baptist or Methodist, or something less widespread such as even a Wiccan academy or a Muslim madras or something like that. So I think there'll be some discussions along those lines as well.
Morgan, this is something we hear about session after session. What's different about the makeup of the legislature this time?
Well, I think that that's always kind of what speculation rides on, because this is something that that a lot of school choice activists have tried to pass session after session. I think what's different this time is, and this question was actually posed to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick very recently, you know, what's different this time? And he basically said, well, I'm the Lieutenant Governor and it's a very high priority for me. And I think that's kind of the main question, kind of the X factor of, you know, how is that going to play into the dynamics of whether legislation gets passed.
How confident are you that school choice legislation will go through to the governor's desk this session?
Oh, I have no idea. It's early in session. I wouldn't make any prediction on that at all.
School finance, let's pivot to that. Obviously,
something less controversial.
I don't know about that, but you know, it is certainly an issue that people are talking about right now, with it playing out, going to the Texas Supreme Court in August, I believe.
Probably about then.
Probably about then. So what are lawmakers going to have to do? Are they going to tweak the system? If you do remain in the public education chair position, do you think that you will advocate for tweaking the system a little bit before that decision is made?
Well, I've introduced one fairly major bill that I don't really think needs to pass until we know the results of the court case. I just threw that bill out primarily for discussion purposes and to get some ideas bouncing around. I think we will make some modifications likely, or at least propose some modifications to the present system during the legislative session. Again, it's very unpredictable, and it's not even predictable whether those bills would flow to the Public Education Committee or if they would flow to the Appropriations Committee. That's up to the Speaker's office and parliamentarians to decide which way they go. And so, and again, until probably next week or maybe even later, we don't know the composition of either the Appropriations Committee nor the Education Committee. So I think it's very hard to predict whether we'll take a fairly aggressive approach toward major changes, which I seriously doubt. I think until we know the results of the court case, it'll be smaller incremental changes, not so much structural change.
What Speaker Strauss told you, given any indication about you remaining in that leadership position?
No. No. I went in the other day and told him I'd like to be public education chair, and he said, thank you for your time. And that's where you leave that discussion.
Right. I've also heard the possibility of a special session if things don't get sorted out this time in the future. Morgan, is that something you'd look forward to cover?
Yeah. Well, first I have to get through the court case on appeal at the Supreme Court. And I think with timing, yeah, oral arguments early fall, then that there could be several months after that before there's a decision. Then, yeah, depending on results of that decision, a special session, or I guess it could almost even land in the next legislative session. So.
All right, well, we'll pick back up there in just a moment. From the Capitol to the classroom, just how can we make sure teachers in Texas are the best they can be? A closer look at teacher certifications with our roundtable next on State of Texas In Depth. Welcome back to State of Texas In Depth. This week we're taking a closer look at education in the state, and I'm joined by House Education Committee Chairman State Representative Jimmy Don Aycock and Morgan Smith from our partner at the Texas Tribune. Welcome back, guys.
Good to be here.
Let's talk about teacher quality a little bit. During the whole House rules vote, the Speaker had proposed, and I guess that it's now going to be in place, a subcommittee within your committee to focus just on teacher quality. What's the reasoning behind that?
Again, I hope it's my committee, but presuming it's my committee.
We're hoping that you're going to be on the committee too, because we've liked having you here because you seem pretty knowledgeable on the topic.
Well, thank you. Yes, there was a proposal made and the membership accepted in the rules debate about setting up a subcommittee within the Public Education Committee. And that subcommittee would deal pretty much exclusively with what we call teacher quality. Certainly one of the major things, probably the major thing concerning a child's education has to do with the quality and training and abilities of that teacher. Certainly campus leadership in selecting those highly qualified teachers is an important role, but that teacher and what goes on in that classroom is the factor that drives the biggest decision about a child's education.
You know, our Brian Collister recently interviewed you at the Capitol about teacher certifications. We looked through the numbers and found that there are more than 230 educators just here in the Central Texas districts that have failed their certification exams more than 5 times.
Well, now, in some of those cases, many of those cases, they're certified to teach in an area. and they're trying to broaden that teacher certification typically to some other certification they do not presently have. And they are teaching for a while within that area they are not certified, and that's a little troubling, to tell you the truth. We want to try to get as many of those teachers certified in math, for example. If you're going to teach math, you ought to be certified in that area. Or early childhood development is a discussion that's going to be had about, do we need an early childhood certification? All those questions about teacher certification and how they get certified and who gets to teach and how long can you teach until you pass your certification in that specified area will be part of what that committee talks about, I think.
What does this all stem from? Why is it so difficult for some teachers to pass their certification? Or, is it a matter of, are we attracting the most qualified candidates for teaching jobs?
Well, in some countries, in Scandinavian countries, they only accept the top fourth or third of the high school graduates into their teaching program. Certainly in Texas, that's not the case. Around the U.S., that's not the case. We have a lot of discussion, and probably some of that committee discussion will center around what are the expectations of potential entering teachers. On one hand, we have trouble getting teachers, and so if you get that standard too high, then the teaching colleges can't recruit potential teachers. If you get it too low, you have discussions about the quality of those teachers they do recruit. So like many things in the legislature, finding a balance is important.
Morgan, covering education for a while, is it really an important topic that you see that they have created a subcommittee for this? Is it something that's very pressing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this was teacher quality was a topic that generated some discussion during the last legislative session, but became kind of controversial or a little bit hot button just because of the possible inclusion of student achievement on standardized tests. And that during the last legislative session, that was something that lawmakers were very focused on. I think that this session, with some relief in the standardized test area, maybe discussion around teacher quality might be able to be a little bit more focused on policy and less on just whether or not there's going to be a standardized test element in it.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have. Morgan, thank you for being with us, Chairman, and hopefully Chairman in another couple of weeks.
I hope so.
Thank you very much for being with us, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas in Depth. Remember, you can join us every Sunday morning in the 8:30 half hour for a broader look at Texas politics. Stay tuned for Meet the Press coming up at 9. I'm Josh Hinkle. Have a great day.